All yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome on behalf of Superintendent Hoffmeister and the Oklahoma State Department of Education. Welcome to our fiscal year 2021 federal programs consolidated monitoring training. Before we get started, I'll go ahead. There we go, change the slide here. Before we get started, I wanted to say that this is set up in a webinar format. So all of the audience's microphones and video are muted. I am also doing this from home, from a laptop computer, and I only have one screen, so I cannot see the chat box and the presentation at the same time. So if you want to put questions in the chat box, that's great, but we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. I understand we have a 2-hour block of time, so there should be plenty of time to get through the presentation and address big questions. Before we get started, a couple of other things I'd like to say. The documents that we'll be looking at here are already available on the federal program's website. I have the web address in the PowerPoint in just a minute. We'll see that. You will also be receiving them in an email to the superintendent within the next week. So everyone who's on the 3-year rotation for this year, I hope you know that already, and that's why you're here. There will also be a handful of districts included that are not on the 3-year rotation. That's after we finish risk assessment to generally add generally a few that score fairly highly on risk assessment. I just got the last data that I needed for the risk assessment yesterday afternoon, so I should have that finished probably Monday, and emails will go out in the middle of next week. Also, there's not enough time to go over absolutely everything today. As you know, monitoring is a very detailed, tedious process. So what I want to do today is give a general overview of some of the documents and the general process. And I hope that then you can go to the federal program's website and look at the documents, the monitoring tool in particular, and bring any questions that you have to one of the question and answer sessions that we have set up for August 3rd and 4th. As a lot of you probably know, normally we would have 2 days of in-person sessions. Usually we do that at the Francis Tuttle Center, but we're not doing in-person sessions this year. So the combination of this webinar and the Q&A sessions are going to take the place of that. So in the same Engage OK announcement where this webinar was announced, there are also signups for those question and answer sessions on August 3rd and 4th. And then lastly, the webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our website within a few days. It generally takes 2 or 3 days for that to happen. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm going to be using, you can let me know and I will send it to you. My contact information is at the end of the presentation. So if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, you have to sit through the presentation until we get to my contact information. So with that, the topics we're going to be looking at today are just generally, what is consolidated monitoring? Why do we have to do this? Then we will look at who gets monitored and why. Some people get monitored more often than others, and just don't want anyone to feel bad about that. We'll explain the process, how we decide who gets monitored. Then we'll look at the 2 different types of monitoring that happen. The majority of people that get monitored will be what we call desk monitored, and a smaller number of school districts will get site monitored. So we'll look at the distinction between those 2 processes. Then we'll go over.
Can I stop you just for a moment? I had one One person asked where they could find the links for those question and answer events. Do you guys post those on your website? Where would they find how to register for those?
Those went out in the Engage OK newsletter about 10 days ago. If they want to send me an email after this presentation, I can forward that newsletter that has the links in it.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's see. We're then, I think, on the monitoring process and timeline. So we'll go over just the steps, the many steps of what we will be doing, what we expect school districts to do, and how the whole thing plays out over the course of the next about 10 months. It's kind of a long, drawn-out process. Then we will look at the tools that you will be using over the course of the next few months. There's the monitoring toolkit, the checklist, and then the monitoring tool itself. When we've done that, we'll go over possible outcomes and the repercussions of certain outcomes. And I will have some kind of patronizing suggestions to give to you. And then we'll open it up to question time. So with that, what is consolidated monitoring? Okay, we do all of this because the United States Department of Education requires that all local education agencies, subrecipients, that is school districts that receive federal money, that they all participate in a monitoring process to ensure accountability. So through the monitoring process, the Oklahoma State Department of Education's Office of Federal Programs verifies federal requirements are being met by the state schools and LEAs. And then if you want to look on put a positive spin on things, the monitoring process also gives OSDE the opportunity to provide technical assistance and guidance to LEAs in order to strengthen program administration and improve the quality of their programs. So who gets monitored? Okay, short answer is everyone does. There are too many school districts in Oklahoma to do everyone every year. You can be grateful for that. So we have a 3-year cycle. Everyone gets monitored over the course of 3 years. This year, fiscal year 2021, which usually abbreviated as FY21, is the 3rd and final year of the current cycle. Then, on top of that normal cycle, we do a risk assessment process and score all of the LEAs in the state on a number of factors that indicate a level of risk in managing federal funds. And the districts that have the highest score, basically ones that represent an elevated risk in the management of funds, are added to the current rotation. So every year, 1/3 of all school districts are monitored just as part of the regular cycle, and then about 10 to 20 more districts are added to that because for one reason or another, they represent a higher risk. Okay, and this, I don't want to sound like we're being mean. One of the things we look at even is just size of the allocations. So just receiving a lot of money can be seen as a higher risk. The more money you get, the more risk there is of things going wrong. So 2 types of monitoring, and we will notify everyone by July 31st whether you will be desk monitored or site monitored. And the difference is desk monitoring is mainly just a paper process. It's checking documentation. So desk monitored LEAs are required to submit the monitoring tool and all supporting documentation on a flash drive, postmarked no later than December 7th. So get all your documentation together, save it to a flash drive, and mail it to our office. by December 7th. If your district is being site monitored, you do that. Everyone does the same thing in terms of getting their documentation together and sending it to us. If you're being site monitored, you will also be receiving an email shortly where we will set up a site visit, and members of our staff will come out and conduct a series of interviews with local personnel. That's generally a one-day event. For some larger districts, it might be 2 days. And then at the end of all the interviews, we will informally notify you of any potential compliance issues during an exit conference, which concludes the site visit. And then formal notification of compliance or non-compliance will follow the complete review of the monitoring tool and all of your documentation. Okay, so moving on. The process and the timeline. As I mentioned earlier, everyone is required to save the monitoring tool and supporting documentation on a flash drive. You mail that to us. It should be postmarked no later than December 7th, 2020, this year. Okay, then a reviewer assigned to your district will evaluate that documentation, add any explanatory comments on the monitoring tool. And then when the first review is completed, the reviewer will return the monitoring tool to the LEA along with any requests for further or alternative documentation. And here, clearly, everyone hopes that after the first review, everything is in order and we can stop there, everything's good. Unfortunately, given just the sheer number of things that we are looking for and that we're looking at, that's pretty rare. So you can expect some kind of request for further or alternative documentation. For our part, the reviewers will complete the initial review of all documents and return the monitoring tool by March the 5th, 2021 at the latest, in order to allow LEAs over a month to gather any further documentation necessary. Okay. Often, your reviewer will review your documentation much sooner than March the 5th, but since every reviewer has several districts that they have to look at, just the way things play out, some districts get done faster than others, but we will have all of the first reviews done by March the 5th. Okay, then when you receive the monitoring tool back with requests for further documentation, you then return the tool again with that requested documentation. And at this point, there will be a lot less material to submit. So the LEAs, school districts, can submit documentation directly to the reviewer by email. And depending on the quality of the documentation, there could be several such exchanges between the reviewer and the LEA. So, ideally, everything's good the first time around. More realistically, it'll take a second round of getting things in. If there's misunderstanding or some kinks to be worked out, there could be several exchanges. Anyhow, regardless of how many exchanges there are, the entire process closes on April 16th of 2021. So in other words, Office of Federal Programs must have received satisfactory documentation for all relevant points on the monitoring tool by April 16th, 2021 for the LEA to be considered compliant. And with that, I would like to look at some of the documents that are up on the website right now that you'll be receiving by email within the next few days. And I've got the web address here where you can look at these now. Here on the left part of the screen is the title page and the table of contents for the monitoring toolkit. The toolkit contains instructions and guidelines that can help in developing a number of the documents that we request. There are also templates for some of the more common documents, and you're free to adopt and adapt any or all of these documents as you like. This is public domain. So while we would like to think that you already have all of these things in place, sometimes there are gaps. And this is meant as a reference tool where you can find templates or examples of some of the documents that you'll need. On the right-hand side of the screen here is the first page of the document checklist. This is, I think, a little less unwieldy than the monitoring tool. So this is just to help keep track of what you have. You can check things off as you go. Your reviewer will probably use this also to indicate requested further documentation, but it's meant as kind of a quick reference that's easier and faster to use than the monitoring tool itself. Okay, then we'll get to the monitoring tool itself. And here, I want to just say up front, we don't have time this morning to go through all 135 items on this tool. Or even if we did have time, I don't think my voice would hold out that long. So let's think of this as an overview of the process. And I want to look at how the tool is put together, how to read it, how to use it, and perhaps give some examples of what we're looking for. And I would like to encourage everyone to have a look at the tool on the website and bring any questions you have about specific points to one of the 4 question and answer sessions that we'll be holding on August 3rd and 4th. Okay, so here on, I hope your screen is big enough that you can read this. The actual tool is a little bit bigger than this, but the first few pages of the monitoring tool are instructions, references to the law of why we do this, and so on. Basically, a more detailed version of what I've said so far. And then on page 8, we come to the tool itself. The first thing is this LEA information table. I hope this is an easy part. You put in, your name, county, district code, superintendent, and so on. And there is, in the lower left corner of that table, a box where the superintendent will check this box to certify that the information in this table is correct. This is the contact information we will be using, so that really needs to be correct. Then the lower box on this same page will be filled out by your reviewer, but it's worth having a look at anyhow. You'll see there's a list of the title programs that your district may receive money from. Each of the title programs has a colored circle next to it. So for example, the first one there, Title 1A, Improving Basic Programs, is a sort of dark pink circle. The next one, Title 1A, Neglected, has a red circle. This is to try to help streamline the process. If your district does not receive funding for one of these titles, then you can skip the indicators in the tool that are marked with that colored circle. So for example, in the top row, the third one over, Title 1C, Education of Migratory Children, with the green circle there, most districts do not get Title 1C, a Title 1C allocation. So if your district is one of those that does not get a Title 1C allocation, you can skip all of the points that are marked with the green circle. If you do get Title 1C, then look for the green circle. You've got to do those. Then, if we look at the bottom row of this table, the third one over it, there is a black circle with a white center, and it says, this indicator applies to all LEAs. So all of the items, indicators that are marked with that black circle, everyone has to do. And then new for this year, the very last box there, we are also including the CARES or ESSER funds, which we have to monitor, the use of which we have to monitor as well. So let's go into the first page here of the tool, and I want to look at just some of the formatting here. So what I've circled there in red, CFR 1, okay, this is the first section of the monitoring tool. It's called CrossCutting Fiscal Requirements. So it's where the CFR comes from. And it says below the CFR 1, it says files, 1 CFR 1A, and then 2 CFR 1B. Okay, here in the CFR 1 indicator, there's part A and part B. So we're asking for 2 documents. And when you submit those documents, please label the documents as it says here. So the first one is 1 CFR 1A, and then the second document would be 2 CFR 1B. And as we move over to the right, okay, you see the first column is references to the law, is why we're asking for this information. Then the second column over, it says A, submit to OSDE, and it tells you what we want. The LEA's written inventory procedures, including the following, and it tells you what elements should be in your inventory procedures. So the first document you submit will be labeled 1 CFR 1A, and it will be your district's inventory procedures. Then the second document will be 2 CFR 1B, and if we go to that center column, it says B, submit to OSDE previous and current fiscal year, if applicable, inventory list of equipment and computer devices. And then it has a list of the things that should be included on your inventory. It says if applicable because a lot of districts don't buy durable goods with their federal funds. And if you're one of those districts, then you won't have to submit anything. Okay, which brings up another point. As you go through the tool, there will be several items that simply do not apply to your district. I would like to ask you to make a list of the items that do not apply and submit that list together with all of your other documentation. And the reason we ask that is if your reviewer comes, is going through the documents and sees this is missing, they'll say, they'll tell you that it's missing and they'll ask for you to resubmit. If you have a list saying, which items don't apply and then just a word or two of why it doesn't apply, then your reviewer will know that the item's not missing, but that you just didn't have to do it. And it'll save everybody a lot of time. Okay, another thing that I'd like to point out here while we're on the first page, CFR 1A, like a lot of things, is asking for procedures. There are other places where we will ask for policies. And I found over the last couple of years, there's some confusion between procedures and policies. A procedure is just a step-by-step process. Who does this job? Job title, not person's name, but which person does this job and what steps do they take to do it? And some of these procedures can be very simple. So don't overthink things, but if it says procedures, we want a step-by-step description, who does it and what steps do they take. Procedures should be on letterhead or something that identifies that these procedures are specific to your district. Policies, on the other hand, are general policies, and they need to be board approved. So when you submit the policy, there should be some indication that it has been approved by your school board. Okay. I have just some other examples of procedures. So if you look at CFR 3, it says submit to OSDE the LEA's written procedures for the use of the financial management system, and it tells you what items should be included in those procedures. Again, this is just a step-by-step thing. Don't overthink it, but who does this and what are the steps they take? In a lot of smaller districts, I think many of these procedures are probably not written down, that you have somebody, Mrs. Jones that's always done it and she knows what she does, and it works fine. But the example I like to make is, if Mrs. Jones wins the lottery and flies off to Jamaica from one day to the next, then you're stuck. So there should be written procedures somewhere so that if there should be an interruption in your service, that somebody else can step in and they have an idea of what to do. So here are some examples of the sort of procedural questions that we have. And then we provide a step-by-step or item by item what elements we expect to see in those procedures. Okay, here. Ooh, I got a red outline on this. Hadn't expected that. Okay, here's an example, CFR 8, of a policy. So your written compensation policy, and this is the type of thing that would have to be board approved. So there should be some indication that it's specific to your district, that it's been approved by the board, and then your compensation policy should include the elements that are listed there, the A through E. A number of districts in the past have just sent in, say, the pay scale for their teachers. Okay, that's part of your compensation policy. It's not the whole thing. We'd also like to see, any benefits or incentives or stipends, how those things are decided, as well as how you determine salaries for non-teaching staff. Okay. We move on to, this is the second section of the monitoring tool called Policies, Procedures, and Requirements, or the PPR section. And I'm going to look here at the first one, PPR 1, A and B, because this is kind of typical of a couple of indicators here on the tool. So the first part is another procedures question, procedures for time distribution records. So, who oversees gathering and processing time distribution records, making sure everything is accurate and that everything is signed and so on. So, a procedures document. And then B, there towards the bottom of the page, it says sample time distribution records. On this item here, your reviewer will compile a list of employees that are paid with federal funds, and we try to get a fairly random selection of your employees paid with federal funds, and your reviewer will submit a list to you, and those are the employees for whom we would like to see sample time distribution records. Okay, it doesn't mean you just grab the first 2 or 3 off the top of the heap or out of the file, whatever, but your reviewer will provide you with a list of names, and you will send in sample time distribution records or time and effort sheets for those employees. If you are on a 6-month model, we use the 6-month time and effort sheet, then you can provide the most recent ones that you have. So you won't have any from the fall, so you could provide some from the spring of the 2019-2020 school year. And that's the case here with all of the documentation. We would like the most recent documentation that you have. Some of the things that we'll ask for are things that maybe only happen in the spring, like school report cards or things like that. In which case you would take the most recent one. Don't wait until March or whatever in order to send in new documentation. Try to gather the most recent stuff to send in by December. Okay, another thing I want to look at here in the PPR section, a number of items will ask for, like here in PPR 6A, it says evidence of posting the hotline. This is the OIG hotline contact poster. So if we ask for evidence of posting something, we'd like to see either a photograph of a poster in place in one of your school buildings. So, a photograph where you can see that it's actually up in your school, or if you post things online, take a screenshot of your website where it shows this item or this information. So number 6, it's asking for a poster. We'd like to see a photograph of that poster up in place. Number 7 says evidence of the most recent school report card dissemination. That is, how do you get this information out? If it's posted on your website, we'd like a screenshot. If it's a letter or an email or a newsletter, send us an example of those things. Okay, new for this year. Actually, halfway new for this year. The next section of the monitoring tool, the student identification section. Okay, the first two, they have a little pink circle there saying, this is for Title 1A. It's kind of a teaser because I think everyone gets Title I, so everyone still has to do these. And SID 1 and SID 2 refer to your either targeted assistance plan or your school-wide assistance plan. So if you have only targeted assistance schools, then you can disregard SID number 2. If you only have school-wide schools, you can disregard number 1. If you have both, then you're going to have to do both. So like above, with the time distribution records, your reviewer will send you a list of sites, of school sites in your districts that we would like to see the targeted assistance or school-wide assistance plans for. So, don't just send in everything. Your reviewer will ask for them, and we'll go over them. Some of the larger districts have far too many sites to go over everything, but we will ask for a random selection to be sent in. Okay, here I just was showing, when I picked this screenshot just as an example of the color coding on the left. So like SID 8 is Title 4, SID 9 and 10 are Title 1C. So if you, don't receive Title 4 or you don't receive Title 1C, then you can skip these. In Title 4, a lot of districts transfer money out of Title 4. If that's the case, then SID 8A still regards you. We'd like to see some evidence that consultation was made to decide to transfer that money out. But SID 8B would not apply to you, because if you decide to transfer it all into Title I, you're not distributing it as Title IV funds to the schools. I also wanted to look at these, I never know how to pronounce this, PNASE or PNAS 6 and 7. These regard training, homeless training. So 6A, evidence of dissemination of the homeless liaison's duties. So a photograph of a poster or a screenshot of your website. Then evidence of homeless training for staff. So we'd like to see some kind of meeting agenda or perhaps the materials used when the homeless for training that goes to staff. And then number 7, this is important, homeless liaison participation in trainings. Beginning last year, there is a specific training that homeless liaisons are required to do. It's a training called Kickstand Training, and that's provided by the State Department of Education. And in mid-August, there's an email that will go out to the homeless liaisons in each district with a link to sign up for this online training. So what we're looking for here in the PNACE 7 is the certificate of completion of that Kickstand training course. So again, there's an email will go out directly to the person listed in GMS as homeless liaison. They will do the online training course. At the end of the course, they receive a certificate, and that's what we want to see here as proof of training in PNACE 7 is the certificate of completion of the Kickstand course. Okay. Another point that has been prominent in the last couple of years, this CQ1, we ask to see the credentials of paraprofessionals working at Title I sites. And again, here, your reviewer will compile a list of paras that we would like to see the credentials for. And we have a list of what acceptable credentials are. And that can be the result from a parapro test or a work keys test, a transcript or diploma showing that the para has earned an associate's degree or higher, or showing that they have 48 credit hours completed at an institution of higher education, or the paraprofessional credential that's issued by teacher certification at the State Department of Education. Okay, and I see my chat box pops up from time to time. I see there's some questions starting to pile up. I will get to those at the end, but I can't see my presentation in the chat box at the same time. Okay, then new this year, we have the CARES Act, or ESSER funds, and I have to admit, I went through the tool this spring and tried to combine items or remove redundant items in an effort to shorten the tool, and I was really happy that I kind of whittled it down a little bit. And then the CARES Act came along, and we have to monitor for that too. So I had to add a number of items here and brought it right back up to the same length that it was before. Here, basically, we're looking at how you've decided to use your CARES Act funding, and depending on how you use it, you will have to provide some documentation. So I doubt any district, I doubt that all of these things will apply to any single district, but I'm pretty sure that several of them will apply to all districts. So things like an inventory of equipment that you purchase with CARES Fund, B, or A, procedures for maintaining documentation, again, simple steps. C, evidence of equitable services consultation. I hope these are fairly quick things, but we had to add these to monitor for CARES Act. Okay, then finally, we've reached the bottom of the monitoring tool, and find this box here. And what happens in the top of these boxes, when your reviewer has finished the first review, they will sign it, put a date on it, and send it back to you. And then if we need to cycle through that 2 or 3 times, maybe with further requests for documents or alternative documentation, each time the reviewer reviews the tool, they will sign it and date it to document the date that it went back to you. In the end, when we have all of the documentation and it is all in order, your reviewer will, in the lower box here, put compliant, sign it and date it, and then our office supervisor, the executive director of federal programs, will also sign it and date it. You will get a final version of this as a PDF file together with a letter of compliance, and it'll be over. You'll be done for another 2 or 3 years, hopefully. And then we get to the outcomes. So compliance, that's what we want for everybody. When the Office of Federal Programs has received and approved all the relevant documentation before April 16th, a compliance letter will be sent to the LEA together with a copy of the monitoring tool checklist and the final version of the monitoring tool. And everybody's happy because it's over. Okay. There are other possibilities though. So non-compliance. Okay, I should have included a thing here. The first way to be non-compliant is if you fail to get your documentation in by December 7th. So if you simply do not submit documentation by December 7th, you will be considered non-compliant. That very rarely happens. So more commonly, if the Office of Federal Programs has not received all relevant documentation by April 16th, or it's not approvable as received, then the LEA will be found non-compliant and you get a non-compliance letter. If you are found to be non-compliant, reimbursement of all federal funds will be withheld for the remainder of the current fiscal year. There is an out. The non-compliant LEAs have 30 calendar days to submit a corrective action plan for each missing or unacceptable item. Then, once the corrective action plans have been received and approved, then that LEA's federal funds for the remainder of the current fiscal year will be released. Okay. A failure to submit corrective action plans within 30 days. So let's say you don't get all your documentation in, or it's not acceptable by April 16th. You get a non-compliance letter, you get a list of things that we need corrective action plans for, and let's say you just blow it off. So failure to submit corrective action plans within 30 days could result in withholding of federal funds for both the current and the following fiscal year at OSDE discretion. So that's really an outcome to be avoided. So here's the section I promised at the beginning, some kind of patronizing suggestions, but I think these are actually good suggestions. Designate a manager, if possible, assign one person, a point person with thorough knowledge of district operations and strong organizational skills to manage and oversee the whole monitoring process. The second, this is really, really important, start early. Identify and assign district staff to be responsible for specific requirements and meet on a consistent schedule to better ensure accountability. Third, please be specific, especially when creating and reviewing procedures. Identify specific steps in your local processes and the specific positions responsible for implementation. Be thorough. Since the monitoring tool is no longer divided by title programs, make sure that every section is reviewed to ensure that you've submitted all required documentation. And lastly, ask questions. feel free to ask any questions you want. The more the better. Use your reviewer as a resource. If you're unsure what an indicator is asking, it's better to ask and submit the correct documentation and have to return it and have to correct it later. And here, just anecdotally, the first year I did this, I had a district in eastern Oklahoma, and they would call me practically every day with questions about monitoring, through the fall. And to be honest, they were kind of getting on my nerves. But then when they submitted their documentation, it was all perfect. And it took almost no time to review it because everything was right. They got through the process quickly, and I loved them for it afterwards. So, feel free to ask questions. Don't worry about being a pest because everyone's happy to help out and get things right the first time. Okay, so now question time, and I see there are a lot of things in the chat box, so I'm going to pull that up here and try to get to some of the questions. Okay, let's see. Did you email the rubric for this yet? I don't believe I've received it. No, we have not sent out the monitoring tool or toolkit or checklist yet. Right now, those are available on our website, but we haven't finalized the list of districts that will be monitored above and beyond the normal 3-year rotation. As soon as that's done, here within the next couple of days, then an email will go out to everyone with all of the documents and also telling you whether you're being desk monitored or site monitored. Let's see. Okay, here, email from Tanya Jones. Where do you find the registration for the Q&A? The registration went out in Engage OK in the administrator's newsletter. Let's see, not this last Tuesday, but the Tuesday before. If you send me an email, I can forward that to you, and it has the registration link. And let me put my contact. That's my contact information. If you send me an email, I'll get that to you. The phone number here, that's my office phone number. These days, I'm at home a lot more often than I'm at the office, but my voicemail is forwarded to me. So if you want to call the office number, I will get a message that you leave. The most efficient way to get a hold of me, though, is with the email address that's there. Let's see, from Rexwell, aren't we uploading plans to GMS? Okay, that's targeted and school-wide assistance plans. Yes, you are. The monitoring tool and the processes for the school-wide plan and targeted plan were developed somewhat independently. So we may decide to just pull those from GMS rather than having you submit those. Okay, let's see. Is there a date we can expect the reviewer to submit the specific sites they will want information from? Okay, I don't have a date yet, but as soon as we have the finalized list of all the districts, then I will assign the reviewers to all of the districts, and they will start getting in touch with you. So I would expect by mid-August at the latest, you should know that. Okay. In Title IV, when you say show evidence of a consultation, are you talking about consultation with private schools? No. For the use of Title IV, there should be an internal consultation, generally superintendent, principals, maybe some teaching staff who have a Title IV committee that will meet and decide the best use of Title IV funds. In a lot of smaller districts, they decide that the best use of Title IV funds is to transfer them into Title I. If that's the case, then we want to see that a meeting was held to decide that it wasn't just the superintendent's decision, but there was some sort of internal consultation. Okay, will all paras be required to obtain OSDE certification? Okay, this is something that there's been a lot of back and forth on, and to be honest, I am not sure what the current state of that question is. I believe all paras hired in the last year or so were required to get OSDE certification. Those hired before that simply need to have proper credentials. So since I don't work in the Office of Certification, we will accept either a credential, like a college transcript or a degree certificate, or the OSDE certification. Okay, CARES money purchases tech devices. Do you inventory them if they are less than $500 and considered a supply? I will have to check on that, but I do not believe so. If they're coded as supplies, you wouldn't have to inventory them. If they are durable goods that you're going to use over the course of a number of years, then yes. I'm not sure that the difference is a money difference, but it's in the nature of the goods. I'll check on that and send an email, or I'll have an answer by the time we have the question and answer sessions on the 3rd and 4th. Okay, if you completed Kickstand training in 2020, do you have to do it again in 2021? Yes, I believe so. I think that is going to be an annual training. I understand that the training itself has been modified and streamlined a little bit. There was a little bit of pushback last year because it was very lengthy, and I understand that it's a little bit smoother this year. Okay, do we show credentials for all paras in a district, or only Title I schools, or only paid with federal funds? Okay, all of your paras are supposed to be credentialed, we'll say that. What we will look for, in the federal programs consolidated monitoring, we will give the district a list of paras that are, we'll choose from among the paras paid with federal funds to see their credentials. So we won't be checking other paras, but they should all be credentialed. Okay, is this a different Kickstand training for homeless liaisons than we completed last year? Okay, again, that's the same as before. The Kickstand training is to be done every year. It is slightly different. I understand it's been streamlined a bit. Okay, how soon do we get information on who our reviewer is so we can ask questions? Okay, hopefully by the end of next week or beginning of August at the latest. Has SDE received any guidance from USDE on whether any flexibility will be provided to districts on holding certain public meetings due to COVID-19 limitations? Okay. I am not aware of guidance from USDE, but I've gotten questions about this several times. We are perfectly happy for you to have meetings like your Title I meeting and so on Zoom. We would like some indication, either a screenshot of a participant list, or if you can record the participants just so that we can see that it actually happened and that there were people attending. Okay, does my designated manager have to be a certified educator? Can it be my office manager? That would be perfectly fine. you want somebody who is familiar with the operations of the school and with federal programs. If that's your office manager, that's great. Okay, here, I'm having trouble connectivity. We'll send requests for PowerPoint in this presentation. Okay, yeah, the PowerPoint is, or the presentation is being recorded. It will be available on our website within the next few days. If you would like the PowerPoint, I can send that to you. Just send me an email and I'll get it to you. Okay, then let's see. Ideas on how to do annual Title I parent meeting required this year. Is putting a PowerPoint with all of the info on Facebook acceptable for this? I would say just putting the information on Facebook is not enough. You could hold a Facebook live a streamed meeting. Google Hangouts works, Zoom works, Teams works. There are a number of platforms that will allow you to have virtual meetings, but I think you need some kind of synchronous meeting. And then last question here from Barbara. Can we begin the Kickstand training now? Not yet. The email with the link to the training, I just got this message this morning saying that it should go out in the middle of August. So we have to wait for all of the GMS to be updated with the contact information for homeless liaisons, and then we will send a link out to homeless liaison to this year's Kickstand training. And then is Kickstand required of all homeless liaisons or only the ones receiving the Kenny-Vento grants? It's required of all homeless liaisons. Any other questions? Well, we are right at our 1 hour mark. Pretty fantastic timing. Okay, well, with that, I would like to thank you all for being such a wonderful audience and encourage you to please do look at this year's monitoring tool and documents on our website and make a note of any questions and sign up for one of the Q&A sessions on August 3rd and 4th. If you cannot find the link for the Q&A session, send me an email and I will get that to you. You can always, if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, send me an email, I will send it to you. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have by email, or I'll look forward to seeing you guys in one of the sessions on the 3rd and 4th. Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh no, everybody can see my 4-month haircut. I'm gonna end the meeting now. Thanks. See you all on the 3rd and 4th.